everyone. Even though it's still preparing, we're actually streaming. All right. Yay. We did it. Okay. I feel like, our world today is really teaching us a lot of adaptability, flexibility,
Yes.
patience, ability to, flow with what's happening. I mean, it's pretty, yeah, we're kind of in graduate school. All of that, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. All right. So I am Maggieostara, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you to Sovereign Sisters Salons. And I have with me today one of my favorite people, Dr. Abiola Oladoke. And we have had some really wonderful conversations about our work, which is actually very different. And yet there's these incredible overlaps and ways that they inform each other, and we get really energized when we talk about our work. So I knew she was one of the first people I was going to ask to come and participate with us in these salons. So I'm just so happy that she's here. So say hi, Abiola.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and just to talk a little bit about what our topic is today, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Abiola, as she likes to be called, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive in. All right. So our topic today is how to use your foundational heritage to reclaim your health sovereignty. And September is Health Sovereignty Month here at Sovereignty by Design, because I wanted to start having some themes and looking at the different ways in which sovereignty shows up in our lives, all of these kind of different aspects. And it's a way that we get to explore really what sovereignty is, because I think of sovereignty as a many, many faceted diamond. It's got many, many different sides to it. And I learned from Eben Pagan years ago. He's really brilliant. If you don't know him, he's just a really brilliant guy. But he was talking about how when you have a concept, if you can take it and break it into more and more different pieces and look at all more and more different facets, it becomes very, very rich. And it becomes something that you can explore for a long time. And that really has always inspired me about sovereignty. So we're focusing now on health sovereignty. And so I'm really glad that that Dr. Abiola is with us today. So I'm going to say your formal bio here, so people get a chance to get a little bit of the sense of the richness and the vastness, really, of what you have to offer. So Dr. Abiola, a multipreneur at heart and indeed. Okay, I have to just say, before I ever met Dr. Abiola, Jessica Hadari, who is like the connector between us, who is a great connector out in the world, she said, Maggie, you really need to meet Abiola. She's got 7 businesses. I was like, 7? I've got 3. I thought that was a lie. She was like, I've got 7. And I was like, okay. So anyway, let's talk about multipreneur. Okay. Yeah. Multipreneur in heart and deed, Dr. Abiola Oladoke, known as Dr. Abiola to many, is the founder of O&A Wellness Group, Healthy Palate, Central Coast, Cryoslim. Is that how you say that? Cryoslim? Cryoslim. Okay. Empowered Entrepreneurs, Voce Fiori, and Home Front Warriors Project, a nonprofit PTSD clinic for veterans, active service members, law enforcement, and first responders. So did you catch how many that was? That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different projects.
Yeah, we're missing one. We're missing.
Oh, and we're missing one. Okay. She's been an entrepreneur since age 13 and a clinician for over 2 decades. Her employment career includes working for a home health company, the United States Army, a federal contracting company, and the Department of Air Force. With training and experiences in psychology, applied neuroscience, clinical nutrition, functional medicine, and manual therapy, Dr. Abiola brings comprehensive approaches to the health and professional successes of her clients. She's a dynamic speaker gifted with the ability to drill down brain and bodily functions into successful strategies, which her clients use to achieve success in life and in business. And you can find her at drabioladoke.com. Okay, so I will go ahead and put that in the chat at some point, but I'm not going to do that right at this moment. So welcome, Dr. Abiola.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thanks
here.
for having me. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be here.
I'm really excited that you're here. So I actually want to start off by asking you a question that, and you can say pass and come back to it later if you want to, because I know it wasn't prepared for you, but which is to share just what your take on sovereignty is. Like if someone were to say to you, so you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to speak on this piece about health sovereignty. And they were like, well, what is that? What is health sovereignty? What is sovereignty at all? Like what's the meaning for that in your life?
Yeah. So I'm not going to pass on that. I'm going to share it on that. So sovereignty to me is actually something that I feel we all should embody when we want to live a full, authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, by definition, we're talking about, supreme power or authority. That's the definition of being sovereign. But internally, recognizing the powers that we have ourselves in order to actually manifest and live the life that we want to live and live that life every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that translates into every area of our lives, including health, which just happens to be where I focus on, but it goes into everything that we want to do and we want to be as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say, given, I mean, we are here, we're in the midst of a pandemic. Here in California, we just had fires and all up and down the West Coast. We've got a very supercharged political situation happening right now. And so the stress level is kind of off the chart for a lot of us, right? And so I'm just wondering if you have any reflections on what you feel in terms of developing our personal sovereignty and our health sovereignty in such an incredibly charged situation. And we're going to dive in more into your specific work, but I just wonder if I imagine that this has been coming up in your work with
Yes.
clients and patients a lot. There's been a lot that's ruminating, and just if you can reflect on that, that would be great.
So, one of the things for me, because that's a very common theme right now with, because there's a lot of people that are presenting at the clinics, with a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress with everything that's happening. And they're just wondering, how do we cope with this? And one of the things that, I've been explaining and sharing with people, it's kind of like it's all come home to roost, in 2020, with the pandemic and then everything else that subsequently followed. And one of the things I just always share with people is, first, if we know who we are as an individual, and if we recognize who we are as an individual, and we actually know our values, that helps us to respond to all of the stressors that are in our world. And that goes back to, what it means to truly live a sovereign life. Because we attach sovereignty to royalty, to people in power, to people that, but we all have that power. We don't have to necessarily come from royal bloodline in order to feel sovereign. And it is that power within ourselves, and to look at everything that is happening right now and to just go, where is my power? Like, where have I given my power away and allowed somebody else or something else to actually overtake me and to say, this is how you're going to be? So I see many people and I share with them, first, you have to know your values and know who you are. Because if you know who you are and you know your values, then it's very, very difficult for somebody to actually sway you in the way that you don't want to be swayed. And then you feel bad afterwards, or you make a decision and then it ends up to not be the decision that is actually supporting you. So that really is, one big thing that I focus on and that I share with people. And in terms of using that to help us maintain and to actually deal with all of the stuff that's happening right now. Like, look, I come from Nigeria originally, and I always share with people, and I said, if you're looking for a place where there's been topsy-turvy situation, all the time, I said, we have that in Nigeria. It is plentiful. And when all of these things started happening right now, the concerns that many people have about what's happening around the world and everything, those were concerns that people had back then when I was growing up, and you weren't sure what was going to happen because everything just got upended. But what has happened is we recognized our internal abilities to actually be sovereign, and people
Mm-hmm.
started standing up for themselves and started actually making things happen. So then it goes to our individual economies, and recognizing that our world, like the microcosm of each person is what makes the macro. And then when each person is actually doing what they should be doing, then it has a ripple effect. So that's what I've just been sharing with people. And I said, we don't need to fret. We don't need to lose our minds. Am I concerned? Yes, I'm concerned. But there is peace with that concern, to where I'm like, I've seen this before, and I've seen how that, the outcome, and I've just seen that it made people a lot more resilient, and it made people a lot more able to stand in their own power and to actually stand for what they believe in, and to eventually find a common ground.
That's great. That is so great. And I think it's really good, frankly. We here in the US are kind of spoiled and
Yeah,
privileged,
yeah.
and we're used to having things all go our own way, and
Pay attention to, that we're now having to pay attention to.
yeah, yeah, and it's good because it's I love what you're saying is that when you have this kind of challenge, it provides you with this opportunity for real growth,
Yes.
because it really puts you in the position of going, okay, where, what do I have to stand on? Right?
Yeah.
What is true for me? And I love what you said, my values and who I am, because so many people are kind of falling into this fight or flight. They're kind of losing their minds.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to have you here because you're such an expert on the mind. I've got this big picture of the brain back there. Look at that. All right, so we can talk about this all day. But okay, so tell me, how did you get to be so passionate
Oh my
about
goodness.
health, and particularly entrepreneurial health? Like, this is
Wow.
a great focus.
Yes, thank you. So, like I said, I mentioned earlier, just very briefly, I'm originally from Nigeria. And aside from being from Nigeria, like, I'm sure everybody's looking at me and you're like, oh my gosh, she's dark skinned. Yes. So there is a condition that I was born with, and, that some other members of my family have. So we have the sickle cell trait, and I actually have
Mm.
a sister that has the full blown, sickle cell condition. And so health and the importance of health has actually been a very paramount thing for me.
Mm.
And, growing up, watching my sister and, some of the health issues that I was having, and overcoming that, and just recognizing that I was allergic to a lot of the medications. And then later on, when I actually did some genetic history to find out what's going on with my genetics, just to understand. And then it became clear why I had a lot of these health issues, as well as the reactions to, pharmaceutical drugs. So that led me into, wow, okay, I can't go to medical school because I can't take drugs, so I don't want to give it to people, because there might be other people like me out there. And then that made me go into functional medicine, clinical nutrition, because every time I would get sick, food was my salvation. It was like I would actually change what I'm eating. And so after a few times that, the first time I didn't learn the lesson. The second time I learned a little bit, but not as much. The third time I was like, okay, all right, you should really pay attention here. And then it just became very, very evident that food is actually quite important, and understanding my genetic history really made me be able to dial in what I should be eating. And it also helped me to understand what I'm allergic to, in terms of what they could give me if I ever need to go to the hospital. I could talk to them about what it is that they could do for me and what they shouldn't do that could potentially kill me. So, but looking at all of that, as I was working with people, in the clinics, some of the people that were coming happened to be, employers, employees, business owners. They had health problems, And I started to realize we were finding as we solved the health problem, it was actually translated into their businesses, like their growth.
Mm,
So, ding, 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 light bulb went off in my head. And I said, wow, you know, we need to start something to just work with entrepreneurs because there is an underlying goal for me here. I believe personally that entrepreneurs are going to change the world. I believe that people in business, because we are the ones that don't sit down and just go, let me just watch TV just for the sake of it. We watch TV with a hidden agenda. We're always looking for something that we could fix. At least that's how I am. I'm like, oh, I could fix that. And you look around your house, there's something that you could make better. Somebody says something to you, it gives you an idea. There's a spark plug of an opportunity. So when you recognize that you are that person, your health needs to be in the best place that it can be, so that you can actually do all those, you can bring all those spark plugs of ideas to fruition.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's what got me here.
that's what got you here.
I took a very long way to get around to doing all of these things, but everything I studied has just been very, very. It's all come full circle to where it's like it's just perfect to really do the work that we're doing to support entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it really, it's interesting how life accumulates, right? Life experience accumulates, and while you're going through it, sometimes you don't see. It's like, well, I went this way and that way.
Yeah.
And there's a certain point in your life where you go, oh, it all adds up.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
so for those of you who are younger than me and Abiola, just know that does happen at some point. Because sometimes I got really confused, but yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah. And I hope you'll tell us a little bit more about genetics at some point,
Yeah.
because I know that really fascinates me. And I'm so interested in the kind of new genetics and the new with epigenetics and brain gene expression and all of that, because I know I'm old enough that when I was taught about genes, it was the genes were your destiny, right? It was like,
Yeah.
that's what you had. You got this DNA and that's it. And,
You can do about it.
forget it. You're either you're blessed or you're screwed,
Yes.
it was just kind of, and now it's so different. And I imagine that, for you, because I know you do these big genetic tests when you work with people, right? And it's very interesting for me, kind of in the realm of sovereignty and a part of how we know who we are, right? Because it's a particular lens on that, the same way that human design is a particular lens on who you are. And that's kind of where you started, like, when you know your values and you know who you are, that's when you can really create a place of stability for yourself.
Yeah.
So can you just speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So, it's just, with everybody that I work with and everybody that comes through our clinical doors and, even all the entrepreneurs that come through, we start with, understanding their genetic history. And we do this comprehensive, lab. And, I work with two, labs, and they're just fabulous with the information. I mean, I end up receiving over 500 pages of information that I then have to distill through. And we take that and we break it down into, okay, why is your brain doing what it's doing? And how do we help your brain function better? Why is your body, like all these different areas? We even look at their ability to detoxify, because as entrepreneurs, if we're not able to actually biotransform, detoxify, and eliminate as we should, it affects our ability to function. It affects our energy. It affects our sleep. And then when those things are affected, we're not able to function properly because you can't think straight. And if you can't think straight, you can't be productive. And if you can't be productive, you can't generate revenue. So it just kind of goes and feeds each other. So we start there, and the information that we provide for people really help many of our clients just go, I know who I am. And I know what works for me, and I know how to work with me. Like, my genes, what I came into this world with, and how to use that to really achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And it's not just, oh, okay, this is medical and let's just do this and let's solve this health problem. Is if you came with a health problem, we can address that. And when that is addressed, how do we optimize you and actually help you be a limitless human being that is living in your sovereignty power.
Yeah, that's great. So would you say when people come to you, the genetic testing is one of the main ways that you tune into what's true for an individual, like how you know what's right for me versus somebody else versus somebody else? And do you
Yes.
have other ways that you do that as well?
Yes, absolutely. There's a comprehensive approach. So, as everybody heard in the bio, I'm, like trained in psychology and applied, neuroscience. And so I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, and I'm just like all into it. If you've ever watched the show Bones, when they describe the people in the lab, at the Jeffersonian, which is supposed to be like the Smithsonian, and they are called squints. That's what many people call me, because I am a squint. I wear glasses, I squint because I look at everything. And so we look at a person's brain. We literally do a map of their brain, and I take that information and correlate that with their genetics, so we can really understand. We do lab work on people. What neurochemicals are you producing, not producing? How are your hormones working? How are they not working? So we just combined all of this to really help. We look at their structural integrity. Are they moving the way they should? Are they sleeping the way they should? So there's a lot of all of these things that we look at that really give, and it can be overwhelming for people because they're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna do how many tests on me? And so we just tell people, like, if you don't want to do all of that, we start you where you are. And because the intention is not to overwhelm people, the intention is to really discover who you are, so we can have you be the person that you were meant to be, and you can live this limitless life. So I believe that we are all born with limitless abilities, and that we can optimize that. And it's all of these things, and it's definitely the reason why I get to have all the businesses that I have, and I get to do all of these things, and I look like I'm still in my 20s, and I have energy from when I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. But don't talk to me at 9:15 or 9:30, because I'm not sure what's going to happen. Either I'm asleep or I'm not coherent at that point. So, because I just usually tell them, I'm like, yeah, 9:30 is my cutoff. Like, my brain's like, no, we need to go and just go, relax and rejuvenate now. So if anybody asks me something intelligent at 9 o'clock, I usually tell people, I'm like, I'm not sure what you're going to get from me.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
I'm like, yeah. 9 o'clock at night's not good. I can answer you 9 a.m. in the morning.
Well, like a good generator, you wear yourself out every day.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, I don't know if you know that about generators,
No.
but yeah, well, so generators, so we have like the most ready, reliable energy of any of the human design types. But one of the things that we need to do in order to be able to sleep well is we need to wear ourselves out every day. And one of the problems that people have in our relatively sedentary lifestyle, which we had before COVID hit, and then we got COVID, and now it's like, I can't go to the gym, I can't, I can't dance, there's all these things, right? So like for me, I know I was like, okay, I'm walking, and there's people all over my neighborhood now, right? Walking, they never used to be there, and riding my bike, because I'm like, what can I do? But because I'm a generator with a lot of energy, and I have to wear myself out. But a lot of people don't realize that, and then they get this kind of malaise, and they get tired, and they think they're tired, but actually, and I'd be interested in your take on this, is it's not that they're tired, it's that they've kind of subordinated themselves to being willing to be not really all the way here. And not really accessing their energy. So they're kind of like this. But when they start actually doing more and moving more and using their bodies more, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I have so much energy.
Yeah, it is so crazy. It's so crazy. It's like what many people say to me. They're like, oh, what do you mean? That, because once we start working with people, I'm like, okay, now, we want you to do this exercise, and we give them things. And then they're like, I can't sleep. And you're telling me that I have to exercise. I'm like, yes, please go walk, and like at a brisk pace, do this, do that, or dance. And I said, you would actually get better sleep. You do this.
Absolutely.
Because we have to actually, and there's a deeper aspect to this, which we don't have time to deal into because we'll just get derailed with the conversation. And I probably would lose a lot of people. They're going to get glassy eyes and their eyes are going to roll into the back of their heads and they're just going to check out. But there's a whole aspect within our mitochondria that actually needs that energy exchange that we need to have. And so when we're not active, we don't produce as much energy as we should produce. And when we then become less and less active. And so it just throws things off down at the organelle level, and that affects our cells, affects our tissues, affects our organs, and it affects our systems. And then we're like,
uh-oh, I just lost your sound there. Oh, you muted yourself. You
yeah,
got so excited. You muted.
yeah, my fingers, I hit the keyboard and I just realized like, you're muted. I'm like, yep, in the middle of talking. That's just what happens. That's what happens live. Yeah. So anyway, so we, there's a lot that goes into that, and we can actually get ourselves going even when we feel tired by doing a little bit of exercise. One of the things I shared with someone a couple of weeks ago, because there was somebody that they just got diagnosed, they tested positive for COVID, and I said, you need to be moving. And I said, do not lay down. Take all the stuff they're telling you to take, do everything it's telling you to do, and we put some stuff together for them too. And I said, and you need to be moving. You need to actually be active. And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, we've got to engage your immune system. We've got to engage your body. We've got to engage your systems and your cells in a way that actually helps you to garner the energy to fight, the infection, so it doesn't take over your body. And she recovered very quickly.
Wow, that's a really great tip, Abiola. I have not heard that one yet, but it kind of doesn't surprise me. Although I know some people have just been like flat, like they literally, like my human design teacher, Karen Parker, she got COVID a while ago, like April, something like that, before it was kind of, there was tests and stuff. And she's extremely active. Like she was training to ride her bike up a Haleakala on Maui, like just serious. And it just laid her flat for like a month. And so but it is interesting. And what that reminds me of is, so that my my teenager has had Lyme and 3 co-infections and has been quite sick. And as Sam was recovering, one of the things, and so has had intense chronic fatigue. But one of the things that their naturopath said as Sam started to recover is, yes, you really do have to start moving. And me being such a mover, I was always like, you need to like walk to the mailbox or something. Sometimes Sam would be like, I literally cannot stand up today. And I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. But as they started getting better, and what Dr. Katie said was, which I found very interesting, is that when you are sedentary, and especially if you have chronic fatigue or something where you're really sick, is your mitochondria go to sleep.
Yeah.
They go to sleep, and so you actually have to wake them up again. And I guess I kept saying, Sam, you need to get up and wake up your mitochondria.
Yeah. There's a whole,
fascinating.
Like we call it like mitohormesis, and just all these things. You have to really, really. It's when you have. I describe this to people. I think this would be simpler. You've got a car with a battery that you have not turned on the ignition on that car for a long time, and the car's just been sitting there. What happens to the battery? It dies.
Right.
So you got to keep turning that. You got to keep turning on the battery.
Or get a jump.
Yeah. You got to jump, and then if you don't, keep riding the car, like driving it around, it's gonna die again. And then you have to get a new battery. But we can't just like take out our mitochondria and just replace it. So what we got to do is we got to make sure that we don't let our batteries, go to sleep.
Right.
Moving.
Right. I just, that made so much sense to me. And I just thought, if people knew that, because even people who aren't really sick, you know what I mean? Like my kid has been, but have sedentary lifestyles, and then they're so tired, and then they're like, well, I don't want to exercise because I'm so tired, So I'm glad to hear your take on that. And so when you, and so I want to kind of circle back to this piece about genetics and epigenetics, and our relationship with that, because and I am like no expert here, so Abiola, please correct me if I, because you're definitely the expert. But my understanding is that we do have some influence over our gene expression, right? And so when you're talking about being a limitless person, right, I think of Joe Dispenza, right, who's like Mr. Limitless Mind, right? And so it's really interesting to me that you were talking about doing brain scans, right, which is one of the things he does stuff based on. But I just, like, in your work, like, how do you I mean, I imagine that this is true, but tell me if this is accurate and then elaborate on it. I imagine that you really look at kind of all these different, since you do like the psychological aspect, right? How are people, what's their self-concept? How are they thinking about who they are in the world, and what their sphere of possibility is? What's their environment like? Like, is their environment helping them? What are their relationships like? What is their relationship to the work that they do in the world as an entrepreneur, or as working inside of an entrepreneurial company? Because I know you work with like small entrepreneurial companies, right? And people who work in that. So it's like, I imagine it's very, there's a lot of factors, right? That can influence, our perception, our well-being, but then that also influences our epigenetics as well. Is that right? So tell me more about that.
This is where, when I'm chatting with people, I tell them this is where science and woo meet up.
Right.
And then you actually recognize that woo is not so woo, and because woo is a form of science, when we can actually, when we have ways to explain this scientifically. So as I mentioned, I'm from Nigeria. I come from a line of healers, that they didn't have the science, they didn't have all this fancy equipment, all the brain imaging, all the, everything that we have now, that technology has brought us, that we can actually validate a lot of the woo-woo stuff, that we used to. I was sharing with someone and I said, in the 1990s, they actually were able to map the Chinese energy meridians, like from traditional Chinese medicine. And you're like, wow, okay, that stuff is real. It is real, because
hey, newsflash, the Chinese knew that, but never mind.
yeah, so it's the same thing like Ayurveda when you talk about the mamas, because the mama, are the same, they're the meridians, with, traditional Chinese medicine. And so you have all these ancient old ways that they knew they had that intelligence because they observed within themselves, and they also observed nature, and they were able to distill that and interpret that. And now we have the science to support that. So when we're talking about, the genes that you're born with, so I'll actually use myself as an example. So, having the sickle cell trait and knowing that, I have this allele and it changes. And then there's other things in my genetics too that I have that I actually have some genes that are null, which means they're there, but they're not active. So, and then you're going, wow, okay, that gene is supposed to do something, because they do have a function. But what I found is the purpose of those genes that are null, and some of the ones that are like the SNPs that I have that are not quite what they should be, that are not working effectively, using certain foods. And this is where the depth of understanding comes with what's happening at the genetic level, and how food influences genes and how genes influence food. So they have this really great interplay that, one is not better than the other. They go hand in hand. And we have to look at that with an individual in order to really go, what's going to work for you? And how is what you were born with, like your genetic template, how do we actually optimize that? So that's a lot of where epigenetics, where that comes from. And, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who, first started doing all these discoveries with stem cell, it was just like fascinating just following his work and following everything that he's talked about. I mean, he went, it's right now, he's out in the stratosphere just with all the discovery and all the information and what we're actually seeing. So my genetic, part of my genetic template with the sickle cell, so I'm supposed to be perpetually anemic. My sister is also like severely anemic, but using certain foods, we've actually increased her red blood cell condition. and I am no longer anemic.
Wow. Using
And
food, just knowing about what to eat.
knowing what you need to eat and providing the body with those things every day. So, medicine becomes personalized, like health is very personalized, and that drives, knowing that you're like, yeah, this is what works for me. So it's not oh yeah, you should take, B12, because I'll actually share this with you. When I was in the military and I was getting sick a lot. So, having sickle cell traits, I don't think it was a good idea for me to go in the military, but I wanted to, and I did, and they let me. So yeah. So so I kept having like all kinds of health issues. Like I would run, and then my legs would just stop functioning, and they had to carry me out on a stretcher because I
Wow.
couldn't complete the run. And I just kept having problem after problem after problem. And then it turns out it was because of the sickle cell. Even though I didn't have the full-blown sickle cell, because I had the trait and I was overexerting myself in ways that I haven't done before, my body was doing crazy things. And I have to be honest, I also I wasn't like, eating the best diet that I could. I was young, I was just doing whatever I wanted to do. I was eating cheese and doing all the things that I should not be doing. So I just really was asking for trouble. And I did get into a lot of trouble with my health. And as we started to actually make the changes, because one of the things they told me was, you need to eat a lot of meat because you are always anemic. You need more meat. And I will eat the meat and I will become even more anemic, to the point where I passed out a couple of times, from severe anemia. And they were like, we might have to transfuse. And I said, no, I don't, just like give me a ton of iron supplements and then I'll figure it out. And that was actually part of what led me into, clinical nutrition and functional medicine, because I just was like, there has to be another way.
Another
And
way.
what I discovered was looking at the human blood chemical structure and plants like green plants, leafy vegetables, we have very similar chemical structure with just a tiny little difference. So the binding, molecule, so we have very similar structures with the whole molecular structure of our blood and greens like chlorophyll. But we have magnesium in chlorophyll and we have iron in ours. And within about 20 minutes of you actually consuming, for somebody that is anemic, consuming like a high amount of chlorophyll rich food, in about 20 minutes, there's a chemical conversion that's happened inside of the body to where that magnesium and the iron, so now you have more blood and your red blood cell count can go up. So you keep that up every day. That's how I was able to solve my anemia problem, because I also discovered that my body, part of my genetics, it doesn't like meat. If I eat too much of it, I turn on other genes that actually can become cancer promoting genes.
Wow.
So my normal genes can now start making cancer cells. And I was like, no, I don't want that. So, and since I've already dealt with the tumors, I had, some cancerous tumors and some benign tumors. And I was like, I don't want to die. And I'm not afraid of dying, but I don't want to die before my parents. So I'm like, my parents are living, so I have to take care of myself, and I don't want to put them through that. So I just really, discovered a lot by understanding and knowing what my genes were doing and how to actually work with me. And I'm not a meat eater, and I am not an eater. I run circles around people around me, and they're like, how do you have so much energy? And you're supposed to, I'm like, I know, you just got to know what you're supposed to eat, and your body's going to give you, your mitochondria are going to give you what you are supposed to have. You're going to have the right amount of energy. You're going to be able to do everything you want to do, and you're going to get to be very productive as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an employee. It's fabulous. Just knowing this information. Wow. This is so great.
It is. It is. It's really great. I'm loving what you're talking about chlorophyll, because, I will often say to people, like if they're, in different situations, because I don't know if I ever told you I have a background in food as medicine. Did I ever tell you that?
Oh, we've talked about a few things, but we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, I know. Well, I do. Like,
oh my God.
25 years ago, I trained to be a macrobiotic counselor. And a big piece of that was food energetics.
Yeah.
And in macrobiotics, it's pretty vegetarian. It's not entirely vegetarian. And I still think of macrobiotics as kind of the baseline of how I think about food,
Yeah.
but it's not what people think of as the macrobiotic diet. But anyway, the thing I was going to say is that I'll say, well, that chlorophyll is the plant kingdom's equivalent of hemoglobin.
Yes.
And
It is
so like just
exactly
get a
what
lot of
it is.
chlorophyll. It's just gonna feed you, and it's all throughout the plant kingdom.
Yeah.
And well, and you'll laugh at this. So this is just a little aside, but so I usually eat, like, my habit is to eat brassicas twice a day. Like I'll eat, collard greens, kale, greens at every meal. I mean, this is one of the things that carried over with me from my macro days, and then broccoli and Brussels sprouts and all. And my Ayurvedic person told me recently, she goes, you have got to cut back on those brassicas. She's like, there's just too much sulfur in them and it's making you dry. And she said, it's fine to eat them, but just not like twice a day, not every single day. Like eat some other things, like you can have some like bok choy and tatsoi and lettuce and, watercress, and I just thought that was so funny. And she's just like, it's actually too many of those greens.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there is
Funny, too much of a good thing, right?
Yeah, too much of a good thing. But what I always say, because I am trained in Ayurveda. It's not part of my bio, but yes, I am, trained in Ayurveda. And I've studied aspects of traditional Chinese medicine because I just wanted to understand, because they're the oldest forms of medicine. But one of the things that, I learned is when you combine, something like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine with genetics, you just get a much richer information, vault that you can just go, how do we actually make this person the best? So there might be a need for you to actually be eating as much, but then maybe there might be some areas where you could go, oh, okay, maybe balance it out with this other thing, so then you're not as dry, like what your Ayurvedic practitioner is saying. Because most of the time, when people just are like, oh my gosh, I want to eat the greens and I'm just putting away all the broccoli and everything, and I just sort of like, you know what, you might need more of that, because you may have some of your genes in your the liver, like the cytochrome P450 enzymes that help us with breaking down and rendering things inert, and so they're not poisonous and they don't harm us. Like, there might be within those enzymatic functions, there might be some that just require more. So more of the sulfur in order to function very well, in order for your mitochondria to do what it needs to do. So when we, look at all of that, then you're like, oh, that's why Maggie is such a, like, that's why you're like, just like eating a ton of it, because I am one of those persons, like I need to have a lot of brassica rich, vegetables. I need to eat a lot of that in order to actually, for my body to function well. And I can't handle, like, I could do a sip of wine, and if I do any more than a sip, I actually am drunk as a skunk. And it's just really amazing. Like, people just go, what? I'm like, yeah, I get drunk very quickly. And it's because of this, genetic functions, like what my liver is doing with this food. So it just really gets you to go, wow. And I moved beyond, being allergic, because at first it was like, oh, are you allergic? And I'm like, no, I just know myself and I know how my body works and I know how to work with me. And so I'm in charge. I know what's going on. I'm not allergic. That just doesn't work for me. That's all.
Yeah.
So I see it as, when you know yourself, your model, all the details about your model, and then okay, leather seats are good in my car. Oh no, I gotta go with cloth. And you can just own all of who you are and just like rock yourself and rock your sovereignty.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing from you is that there are certain, and we were talking about like foundational health heritage, right? And our genetics. And so there are certain things that, that we have that, I don't know if you want to call them fixed, but that are part of us. But there's also a certain amount of leeway that you have with them when you know what they are, right? Which is one of the things I say about human design too, right? Is it's like when we look at a human design chart, yes, the definition is fixed. fixed. Like the definition, the parts that are open and the parts that are colored in are not going to change. They are what they are, but your relationship to them can change. And understanding what they are can be super illuminating. And so there's also, and I'm just wondering if I think that there's an analogy with genetics here, which is that with all of those different, you could call them traits or archetypes or qualities, characteristics, that there's a lower expression, right? And then there's a higher expression. And so in human design, we talk about that there's this soul curriculum that we're all given, which is to move into the highest expression of whatever the pieces are that we're given in our design. And so in that sense, it's not fixed, but we may have certain things that we definitely have ready access to, and then we have these propensities. And when we learn that and we embrace it and we learn to love it, even though, like, let's say you were somebody who actually loved to eat meat, like you just loved it, right? But your body was like, no, right? Like, don't give me that, right? And then you kind of learn, okay, I have to be in a dynamic relationship with my body, because, and I'm a big believer, I don't know what your take on this is too. There's a few things I'm throwing at you here at the same time, but I really believe that the body is not just like the home for our spirit, like the body is its own consciousness, and it's not even one consciousness. It's 70 trillion cells, most of which are bacterial, that we're in, we're working with all the time. And then we've got this like brain up here that thinks that it's what it is, and it's in charge. And I'm like, do you have any idea what is going on in your body right now? It is so complicated. We barely have scratched the surface to understand about what's going on. There's huge intelligences in the body. So it's like getting this thinking mind that thinks it's in charge to be in relationship with the physical body. That's like, well, you know what, we're kind of built a certain way, or in our energy system, which is what our human design reveals to us. And so, well, we're kind of built a certain way, but there is all this flexibility too. So it's kind of a paradox.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's true. And, that's actually a big part of epigenetics. Like what is talked about within epigenetics is, yes, we have this, templates. And I always describe, genes as, look at it, and everything that you have, like it's the blueprint. But then, you've got this house, you've got the blueprints, this is how the foundation is, this is how everything is to be built. And then when everything is built and you move into the house, you're going to put the furniture where you want it. So then it's a different house. So you could have two houses that have the same blueprint, but they're not the same houses, by the time somebody's moved in and they've made it their own. And it's like the same thing that we're talking about here. Yes, we have this, these genes that we're born with, but because of our deeper understanding of mutations and SNPs and how things are happening, we know that even though, somebody has this, if we actually improve what we're eating, if we improve upon our genetics, passing on things to the next generation, we could pass on better, genetic expressions, because the genes, there's a constant interaction with our messenger RNAs, with our, RNA, and with our DNA, and, with the telomeres and all of this amino acids and everything that make up this, they're constantly at work. And if we don't give them the right things that they need to do, then they're going to make copies, and they're going to make new daughter cells that are just really, really messed up. And then we pass that on. So, so they're taking the information from the blueprint, but, they have to rely on what you provide. So if we're like a factory, because that's one of the things I talk about too. I'm like, if we're a factory and we don't have the right, raw materials, we're going to make terrible widgets.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
That's like, we have fancy equipment in the factory, but we've got, terrible, like inferior raw materials. We're going to have, inferior widgets. So, the equipment can be super duper, or we could have equipment that is like not so great, but they work well. And we've got excellent raw materials, and we can produce the most fabulous widgets that just last forever and ever.
So can you share with us like one or two stories about a client when they come to you, kind of where they started out and what you did with them, and then what happened as a result of working with you. I think that would really
Yeah,
help ground this conversation for people who
yeah,
are, I
yeah.
imagine that they're really starting to go, oh my goodness, how do I get a hold of this woman? But I think it would be really great to just, and you can get a hold of her at Dr. Abiola, so just so you know. And then we'll post some other ways for you to connect and do a discovery call with her, which she's going to invite you to do. But just give them an idea, like what is it that you shared about yourself, but tell us about one or two other
Yeah,
people.
so oh my gosh, there's like so many people. Who do I pick? Who do I pick? All right, so I think this is like a good one because she's a business owner, and it was just really fabulous. So I had this young lady that was just she brilliant mind, and her health was just really in the shitters, just really bad. And she was trying so many different things on her own, and somebody actually referred her to me and said, "You gotta go see that crazy Dr. Abiola. Like, she's out there, but trust me." Like, and they told her, they were like, "Oh, and by the way, she cusses a lot, so just don't worry about that." So and I when I we met and we were talking, so we did a comprehensive intake to find out what's going on. And when I'm working with people, I have these core pillars that I look at. And so we were like, okay, how are you doing here? How are you doing here? How are you doing there? And so looking at all of that and the genetic information, we did a brain map on her. We did some labs. We were looking at her hormones because she was having a lot of reproductive issues as well. And she was like, they diagnosed her with adrenal fatigue. And I said, okay, what are you doing? She's like, I'm taking all these supplements, but I'm still not better. And I said, well, let's look at your mitochondria. So we also did some labs that actually look at down at the mitochondrial level, like what her TCA cycle was. So we looked at all of that, and I put everything together, and I was okay. This is what we need to do. So a few core things that showed up was we needed to do mitochondrial repair on her because she was suffering from insulin resistance and mitochondrial dysfunction that was not evident from everything else that she had been going through, and that was the crux of it. So once we figured that out, we're like, okay, we need to correct that. And then we also recognized that a lot of the foods that she actually was being drawn to eat were not for her. And she thought that was so crazy. She's like, how is it that I'm eating this food that's what I crave, and that's actually what's making me sick? And so, and I had to explain to her, and I said, sometimes, especially when we have allergies, we need to sensitize our system to remind it that this is the problem. And so then you get the craving, but it doesn't mean that that's actually what you need. And there were a few other things that I explained to her. So we started working. We were like, okay, we're going to focus on this area first, and this area, and this area. And one of the things that was beneficial for her was to just kind of release herself from any understanding about what she knew about health and what she knew about herself, because she was like, I just need to stop thinking that I know something, because all the research that I've done, all the information, some of it were actually not in favor of what her labs were saying. It was like, no, you should do this, you should do that. So, and I said, all right, here's what we need to do. So we started fresh, and I said, we're going to build you back up, and then we're going to see what happens. So about 3 months into it, she was also very overweight. She was about 62 pounds, 62.5 to be exact, like overweight. And one of the things that we do at the clinics is we do body composition analysis, in person and also remotely. Like, we want to see what distribution of fat, of muscle, what's going on with her body. And so in about 3 months, she had lost about 30 pounds. So we kind of averaged like 10 pounds a month. We were not dieting. Like, her body was just like, I got to get rid of all this excess stuff. And all of the metabolic syndrome rings that were on her, armpits, around her neck, disappeared. So she was looking really good, 30 pounds down. She's like, I have energy. I'm sleeping better. I feel great. 6 months, we retested a lot of the mitochondrial imbalances were corrected, she was feeling a lot better. And a year later, she was a completely different person. And what happened, because she's a business owner, she was not even able to get up. Sometimes she couldn't get up to really talk to clients. And so she would come up with excuses and reason why it wasn't a good idea for her to follow up with a client. And those are some of the things that we also uncovered. It's like, wow, your body and your health has actually been coming up with ways for you to say, they're not going to hire me anyway. Oh, no, what I have to offer is not that great. And, oh man, I'll call them later. And then you magically forget to call them. And, or you want to call, but then something happens. And so she's like, wait, are you saying that the universe was also like conspiring against me? I'm like, no, the universe doesn't conspire against you. It mirrors. And I said, so if you put it out there that I'm too tired and I can't do anything, your brain is going to find reasons to actually like attract. And I'm like, we have these mirror neurons that they're going to bring stuff into your, realm of existence. And I said, you're too tired. You don't want to talk to people. So guess what? Something breaks that you can't talk to people. Something comes up that, you have all these excuses that your environment provides for you in order to not engage, the new clients or to not follow up. So then when she was feeling a lot better, she started following up better. Like her confidence grew. The way that she was actually showing up in her business was very different. Like her potential clients actually recognized that this woman has something to offer. And they were like, wow, you look great. I want to work with you. How do we work this out? So she went from, oh my gosh, I can't keep clients, to the clients going, we just got to figure out how to pay for what you have to offer. And so she went from barely making, 5 figures a year to making high 6 figures a year. And she continues to do that. And it's fabulous, just watching her. And she's like, if I did not get to really understand the depth of who I am and know, and what I share with people is the genetics test. Okay, so full disclosure, this is my 3rd time doing my genetics test. I just sent another sample in because there's new information, with AI. So I was like, okay, let me see what else I can gather from the same genes, and there are additional genes that weren't being tested before that are now available to be tested. So I'm redoing my genetics test, and I'm excited to find out what I'm going to discover. But looking at that, we do that one time, we see, wow, look at all this information. And we can go back and we can say, oh, you know what? I have my brain map. I have my genetics test. I know what my neurology is. I know what my brain is doing. I know how to work better. And we also know when's the best time for you to be more productive, and when's the best time for you to take a break. And so it goes from, oh, okay, it's just about, your health and medicine, to how do you live the day-to-day life that is actually quite productive and rewarding. And so we put all of that together, and she's rocking her business. I mean, that's one great example that I have, but there's tons of people that are just like, and I wasn't going to do this, but because I was like, oh my God, how much work is this going to be? And I said, you know what? We do the bulk of the work for you, because we have to figure all of that stuff out. And I'm like, we have to figure it all out. And a part of doing all of the work for people is actually why I ended up with like 7 businesses, because Healthy Palate is the food service delivery aspect of my business. So we actually do have a cafe. We make food for people, and we also do meal delivery. So I'm like, how easy can we make it for you? Like, we would do your personalized nutrition and we would ship it to you. You just have to warm it up and eat. And people are like, okay, all right, I can do that. So we just really, I'm always looking for how do we make things easier for people, because not everybody enjoys cooking. Not everybody enjoys sitting there and playing chemist with food like I do. I'm like, yeah. So we just do that. But it's just really rewarding to see someone go from, oh my gosh, how do I take care of myself? I don't want to go, because one of the things she said to me was she didn't want to go live with her parents, because she was at that point. Wow. Where, being a 42-year-old woman, and she was going to have to go move back, to her parents and let her mother take care of her.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your brilliance and your spirit and all of your perspectives. It's really been
My pleasure.
delightful connecting with you. And how can people, so I've been saying that people can get you at Dr. Abiola, right, which is is it dot Abiola? Is it,
It's
no,
DRAB, there's no dots, DRABIOLA. So that's the clinical, side of things.
okay.
If you are a business owner, I recommend that you actually go through the business website, which is www.theempoweredentrepreneur.net. And
Oh, okay.
yes, so that one, simply because, coming from there, we know that, okay, we need to look at, productivity. We need to look at how all your health is affecting or impacting your business. So it's the same, but a slight shift in the lens that we look at things when it comes, through, and we know that that person is a business owner or an entrepreneur. So those are, two ways. But even if you send a message to, through drabiola.com, my assistants, they'll look at it. They're good at filtering things out and going, oh, okay, this is where you belong. And that is, those are two good ways to actually get a hold of me. And the other thing too is I want to invite you all to, have a conversation with me. Just go, how do I know more about myself, and how do I know if this is actually something I should look into? And some people say to me, they're like, oh, I did 23andMe, so I know what that is. I'm like, this is not 23andMe. I'm like, this is beyond 23andMe. Like, it will blow your mind when you get your results. Like, you're just gonna go, I don't want to look at all those pages because that's just like too many pages of information. But the discovery call allows us to first get to know each other, and for me to actually understand where you are in your business and in life and what your goals are. And if, looking at your genetic blueprint could be something that could help you to be more successful in business and to understand yourself better, then we can do that. And if it's not, I still invite you to have the conversation with me anyway, just to pick my brain, ask questions. I love to teach, I love to talk. I think I've been talking since the moment I was conceived. Because my mother did not have another child after me. Like, she was like, that's it, I'm done. So I think she was like, oh, no more. This child is just, I out-talk everybody in my family. They will tell you that. And my parents are actually not talkers. So I don't know where I got it from.
Yeah, it's in your design.
Yes.
I think we talked about it at one point, actually. So, all right, great. Well, we'll make sure to post that link. It's O and A, right?
Yeah.
Wellness group dot
And
as.me/discovery call. So we'll make sure that we post it because that's kind of a mouthful.
it is. It is. We were trying to shorten it, and that was, the only thing, because it was a whole bunch of numbers and letters. So that was as far as we could get the link to. Oh, maybe we could have done like a bit.ly. I was just not thinking about that.
All right, that's all right. Well, we'll still have time to if you want to give me a different link, we'll post a different link. So that'll be
Yeah, I think we could actually, I could just ask, for them to just kind of like maybe shorten that and do a bit.ly, and then.
Okay, then we'll make sure to post that. And yeah, and I hope everyone is really getting how understanding your genetics, having a brain scan, doing these different tests, and having somebody with the kind of the level of expertise that Dr. Abiola does, to where you can really get to know yourself on a different level. And when you have that information, just like when you get to know your human design, it enables you to really become sovereign of your being on a whole nother level. Because otherwise what happens is that we're kind of pushed around either by wellness or health practitioners who are kind of giving us a one-size-fits-all prescription, or we're being pushed around by the bacteria that's inside of us that maybe not be the healthiest bacteria, that's craving things for us that's actually not good for us to eat, right? Or this weird thing where you get addicted to things that you're allergic to. I mean, I know I went through that when I first discovered macrobiotics and realized how addicted to dairy I was. And a lot of us are addicted to gluten and to dairy, and it's like not good for us, and sugar, you know. So so getting a handle on those things so that you're not constantly kind of fighting what's going on inside of you, right? Because willpower is well, in human design, willpower is finite. It's not an infinite thing. It's like you can do something for a little while with willpower, but you can't keep it going, otherwise you'll crash. And then you don't have willpower, right? So you need to be, so you can use willpower, like for example, if you're working with Dr. Abiola at the beginning and you're like, okay, I'm going to break this addiction. I'm going to stop doing X for this amount of time. And initially I need to use my willpower to do that. But the benefit is that when you break that addiction, then all of a sudden you don't even want the thing anymore, and you don't have to use the willpower to be resisting it all the time. And I think that a lot of times for people, they don't ever get through that place to where they're actually different, and then their system is supporting them to live their life the way that they want to. So if you have a chronic disease, or if you've been confused and you have been to other doctors and you don't know what to do, I really encourage you to go to, definitely do this discovery call. If it feels right to you, work with Dr. Abiola. I mean, we're so fortunate to have someone like her available to us. I mean, the things that she's able to do, like you were saying, they haven't been around that long. Right? And they weren't around in Nigeria, and so not only do you get a great scientist, but you get somebody who comes from a whole lineage of healers. I mean, what more do you want, So we're gonna wrap it up here, but Abiola, do you have any closing remarks you want to make?
I just want to say thank you to you, Maggie, for actually having me. It's always so much fun, just like talking with you, discovering every time we talk, there's something else that I discover, and that's how it should be. There's just like, there's this infinite depth to all of us that should keep us engaged. And so thank you for asking me to share and asking me to be here. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining us, listening. And those of you that are going to be watching this later, thank you for watching it. I know it's at the end, so you're at the end and then you're getting thanked, but thank you. And I look forward to chatting with some of you if you decide to actually follow through and say, I want to get to know her. And that's all. It's just like, let's talk. There are no obligations. It's not anything. It's just like, let's just see if there's anything to do to help you. And if you are good, I will let you know that, because that's one of the things that, I do tell people. I'm like, if we don't need to change anything, it's good to know that, you're headed in the right direction. Like if you've had your genetics done and all of that. So, and if you're like me, that you just go, yeah, I've done it twice, but now there's like new information and there's all this other ways of looking at things, and then they can, get more information. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. And so then you do it again and you get a ton more information. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. It's always exciting to do these things, and hopefully, some of you, if we're not friends on Facebook, we can, you can just send me a friend request and just please send me a little message and say, this is how we are connected, because I get a lot of friend requests and then I don't know where they came from. And then I'm like,
Who are they?
Yeah.
I hear you. All right, dear. Well, many blessings, much love, take good care. This is a time where we all, need to be kind to ourselves and kind to each other as much as possible.
Extra kind. Hydrate, sleep, ground, and,
So
stand in your power and stand in your values, and turn off the news. If you watch the news, I'm like, no.
All right, dear. Well, many blessings. Much love. Okay. Bye for now.